Here are 37 things that you can do to guarantee that you are not an articulate speaker. It's much easier to identify what not to do and then just do the opposite if you want to become an articulate speaker. Number 1, speak without any structure or any planning. Just show up and start talking, and hopefully you'll find where you're going. You'll bounce between topics over and over again, you'll have no clear path of what you're talking about, and people will be left confused. Number 2, use as many filler sounds as possible. Like, have certain phrases that you say over and over again. Obviously, obviously, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Keep doing that as often as you can. It's the best way to make sure you sound like you don't know what you're talking about and you can't find the right words to say. Number 3, speak as fast as humanly possible. Speak as fast as you can so no one can even keep up with what you're saying, and you want to go as fast the entire way through. This will really help you stumble on your words. It's going to make it much harder for the audience to understand what you're saying. You're not going to be able to think of the right things to say. Your words will tumble over each other, and you will sound like a complete mess. It's also going to make you sound very nervous, which is amazing if you don't want to seem confident in front of other people. Number 4, have a monotone voice. Whenever you're talking, just talk like this. Do not change your variation in any way and just keep everything very flat. This is a guaranteed way of boring your audience and putting them to sleep. If you want a guaranteed way of boring your audience, don't change anything in your speech as you're talking. Keep the volume and the pace the exact same. Number 5, use as much jargon as you can. Use the most technical terms that you can, especially if the audience is not familiar. Use as many acronyms as you can, as many technical terms as you can. The goal here is for you to sound like you're smart. Make sure you feel like you're better than everyone because of all the fancy words and terminology you can use. This is a great way of disconnecting with your audience. Number 6, never look someone in the eye while you're talking. Look all over the place while you're thinking. Just say, hey, yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about, and yeah. And if you do happen to make eye contact by accident, make sure you don't make eye contact for too long. Just look around the room like this and look like a scared squirrel the entire time. Because if you make eye contact, you might actually have a connection with the audience. You might look at their facial expressions to make sure that they're following along with your message. And if you really want to sound like you're not confident, avoiding eye contact makes it feel like you don't feel safe and you're very scared. Number 7, mumble as much as you can. Speak so softly, and when you talk, just don't open your mouth too much so that people have to ask you what you're saying. Have you ever said something and people say, can you say that again? What was that? I didn't quite catch that. That's exactly how you should speak if you don't want to sound confident. Don't move your mouth too much. Keep the movement as little as possible so that the words do not sound very clear when you talk. Number 8, never practice before a presentation or speech. When you show up for the presentation, make sure it's the first time you're saying the words out loud. You won't know your flow, you won't find the right words, you'll go all over the place, you won't know your transitions, and you'll make all the mistakes possible. Because if you rehearsed before time, it would have been too polished, you would have known the words, you would have known how to put your body into it, and if you don't want to look confident, you don't want to practice. Number 9, show the audience visually that you're not interested in being there. You can have agitated, angsty language like this. You can look at the ground the whole time, constantly be moving your head like this, looking at the host for validation every time you're speaking, or just hunching your shoulders down like this and just looking very defeated. I love this technique because you don't even have to say anything and you can look like you don't have any confidence. Number 10, sound like you're not convinced of what you're talking about. When you introduce a new product or you're talking about something you're supposed to be excited about, do the opposite. Sound like you know nothing about it. Yeah, we have this product and it has these features and I think it does this and that as well, and yeah. When you talk like this, you're not convinced of what you're talking about, and the person listening to you will also not be convinced. If you speak from the heart, you're going to sound like this, but you don't want that if you don't want to look confident. 11, overcomplicate the message as much as you can. Try to add as many features and details as you can, because the more technical bits you give the audience, the more confused they are, especially if they don't understand the terms. If I were to convince you to go to the gym with me, I'd say, hey, by the end of this, you're going to feel amazing and your muscles will look great. But if I wanted to complicate this, I would tell you about the stretching routine and why you must stretch this way and what muscles it affects. I'll break down every individual exercise and which muscle fibers it incorporates. And I will tell you of the 14 things you shouldn't be doing while you're doing those exercises. And I'm going to use scientific terms for everything so you're as confused as possible. When you have so much information, you're left confused and you don't want to do it. Number 12, speaking too slowly. When you speak like this, people think you're dumb or you just don't have anything to say. You can make this even worse by speaking slower and then speaking very softly, so time passes by at a snail's pace. Number 13, repeating yourself unnecessarily. So yeah, like I mentioned, so we were talking about this earlier, and so again, what I was talking about when it comes to this, and so on and so forth. If it's an important theme or message in your speech or your presentation, then repeat it. But if it's not, keep saying the same phrases over and over again, or keep repeating the same pieces of information you've already given the audience over and over because you have nothing else to say. There's no faster way of boring the audience by telling something that they already heard earlier. Number 14, using cliches. Opening your speech with the same exact quote that everyone opens it with, or something very generic, or trying to copy a stand-up comedian's joke, trying a trick everyone's seen before, or giving an example everyone's heard 1,000 times before. The more familiar the audience is, the more likely they are to tune out to what you're going to say. Make sure there are no surprises whatsoever. Number 15, completely ignore how the audience reacts. When you step on stage, your job is just to say what you came to say. Don't look at their faces. If they're on their phone or checking the time or they're yawning, don't bother changing anything at all. If they're not interested, your job is not to pay attention to them, it's to finish your presentation. Because your goal is more important than their attention. If they're bored, let them be bored and get on with it. Number 16. Having no interaction with the audience whatsoever. Don't ask them any questions. Don't ask them if they're following along. Don't even look at them. Stick to your slides the whole time. Talk as if you're talking to yourself about yourself. Don't take any questions. Don't even try to connect with the audience at any level. And make sure it sounds like you're speaking to a wall. That's a great way of having no connection with the audience. Number 17. Crack inappropriate jokes. This works especially well when you don't know your audience. Try out jokes that you would tell your friends. Assume the audience is going to laugh at them. Try it out right at the start of the presentation, because nothing tanks a presentation worse than a bad joke right at the start, making the whole thing very awkward. And try to make the jokes as inappropriate as you can, because by the end of it, you can guarantee people will not like you, and you will not get called to present again. Number 18. Show absolutely no enthusiasm for the topic. If you sound excited, people might even be interested, because the emotion you show is the emotion the audience receives. If you sound very excited about something, people will get excited. But if you want to be really boring, then you have to talk about this topic like you just have no interest in it, and then you're just forced to be there and you just have to talk about it. This is how a lot of corporate presentations go. Everything is so boring because the person presenting just does not want to be there. Number 19. Do not be on time. Try to speak too little or too long. Keep rambling and rambling and rambling and wasting people's time. If you have a 10-minute slot, just speak for 30 seconds and say, that's it, and walk off the stage. But I highly recommend taking more time than you've been given, so that you take time away from other speakers, you disrespect the audience, you disrespect the event's times, and people can't wait for you to stop talking. Number 20. Choose incorrect words when you're speaking. If you're talking to an intellectual audience, say things like, I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff that's really cool, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things that we can do. Do not adapt your vocabulary to the audience you're speaking to. Instead, be as informal as you can. Even try to use incorrect words. If you can show the audience you don't have a good command on language, then you can show them that they don't have to trust what you say. Number 21. Do not tailor your message to the audience. Speak to everyone the same. If you have a complex idea and you have to share it with children as opposed to people who know about that subject, explain it the same exact way. Because if you know different audiences have different preferences and different understandings of the topic, you might just simplify it for people who need more understanding, and you might raise the level of vocabulary and the terms you use for a more intellectually capable audience. You definitely don't want them to feel like you're one of them. Number 22. This is everyone's favorite. Read from the notes. I'm not talking about bringing your notes, referring to the notes and talking. I'm saying read from the notes the entire time. Have a piece of paper in front of you and just read off of it. Make them feel like they could have received that speech in an email and have read it themselves. You want no connection with the audience, you just want to look at your piece of paper, read the words, get it over with, and say it in as monotone a voice as you can. It'll make you look unprepared, unprofessional, and uninterested. Number 23. Use negative body language. Look very hostile and angry. Be very defensive the whole time when people ask you questions. Or hide behind the lectern the entire time. Don't make your hands visible. Put them in your pocket the whole time. Don't smile at all. The more negative you can look, the more you can guarantee the audience is not going to perceive you in a good way. Number 24, get distracted by everything. If you're in a conversation or on stage, every tiny thing that's happening, get completely distracted by it. React to it. If someone walks in halfway through your speech, focus all of your attention on that and completely lose track of what you were saying. If you want to get really good at this, make sure you never practice so you're super panicky about everything. Number 25, do not be concise. Go all over the place when you're talking. Have no point, no clear message. Just talk and talk and talk, and hopefully you'll find out what you're talking about. You want to say as many words as possible with as little meaning as possible. It will also help if you combine this with some of the other tips by mumbling, not talking very loudly, and looking very negative. Number 26. Do not take questions well from the audience. Get very personal about it, or try making up an answer when you don't have an answer. People are really good at telling when someone's making up an answer or they're BSing because they start panicking and they start saying things. They also start speaking really fast all of a sudden. Make the audience regret asking you questions. Number 27. Be inconsistent with your message. Tell them to do one thing, and then tell them to do something else, and then something else, and then something else. Your goal is to make them as confused as possible about the call to action you're giving. What do you want them to think, feel, or do? And you want to give them many opposites, so they're very confused about where you're going with this. Number 28. Do not adapt to the environment. If you're in a very large room, you're going to have to talk loudly. Don't do that. Still whisper as if you're talking to people in a small room. Your gestures might have to be really big to accommodate for the big audience. Don't do that. Keep your gestures very, very small. Here are two things we're going to talk about. This makes sure no one can see you. And don't find out whether you have a handheld microphone or a lapel microphone, because if you have a handheld one, you'll have only one hand to move around when you're talking. By not adapting to the environment, you can try to deal with this last minute to add that extra little bit of panic. Number 29. Have absolutely no personal anecdotes or stories. Stories can be very emotional and they can build trust with the audience. You don't want that. Bombard them with facts, figures, features, as many pieces of information that they get a headache and they have absolutely no reason to believe you. Because when they don't know anything about you, they have no filtering mechanism in their brain that tells them, should I listen to this person? Stories will create credibility, so you don't want that. Number 30. Do not use any visual aids. If you are talking about a very complex subject that requires people to visualize the information, do not use any visual aids because it might help their understanding. Instead, try to talk about it and describe it. The brain processes images much faster than it processes language. You can show them an image of a tree and they will know right away what kind of tree it is, what environment it's in, or you can painstakingly describe every single thing, and that's going to take much longer. And they might not understand properly either. Number 31. Generalize everything. Make really broad statements like they're a fact. Never do this. Never drink milk. Always wake up at 4 in the morning. When you make generalizations like this, most of the time you're going to be wrong. You're going to have conflicts with people's beliefs, and it'll make you sound like you don't have facts and figures ready. Because when people don't have specific numbers to prove something, they turn to generalization. Number 32. Use as much slang as you can. You want to sound like a teenager in high school, especially when you're talking in professional environments. You don't want to pick your words very carefully. You just want to say the first thing that comes to mind. Number 33. This is a big one. Have absolutely no variation in your speech. You can talk in an interesting way and then talk like this, but then the audience get used to the rhythm in which you speak. The entire time you talk, the rhythm has to be the same. Really fast way to make sure the audience tunes out. Because if you vary it up, vary up your tonality, vary up your pace, go really, really fast, and then go really, really slow, you might just engage the audience. Number 34. Ignore all cultural context. Don't consider the cultural backgrounds of the people you're speaking to. Pretend everyone's from where you're from. Have no considerations for them or their experiences in life. And this really helps if you can continue to make generalizations based on your way of life. Number 35. Talk at people. Tell them what to do. Tell them your beliefs are better than theirs. Tell them you know more than they do, especially if they are more qualified than you. Go out of your way to show people that you are better than them. You can combine this by using fancy vocabulary only for the purpose of making them feel dumber. Number 36, do not use any pauses. When you're talking, just keep talking. Keep talking because you're going to stumble on your words. You're not going to have any impact. Your message is not going to sink and land, and people won't have any idea what you're saying. Because if you're talking and you take some time to think, you might just come up with better words. You might sound like you know what you're talking about. you look more relaxed and credible when you talk. But if you talk really, really fast, you're going to sound like you're very, very nervous and you're talking all over the place and you just want to get this over with. You don't want to take any pauses if you want to sound like you have no confidence. And the last mistake you can make is if you are on stage and the stage is large, the audience is big, stand in the same spot the entire time and don't move at all. Preferably at one side of the stage, looking at one side of the audience. This will do a great job of making sure everyone else feels completely disconnected. Because there's no variation in visuals, people get bored really easily. You can enhance this technique by hiding behind the lectern as well. Now your body's not even visible. And then you can also have notes on top of that. This is a great recipe for a boring speech or presentation. The only exception to this is if the setting of the event calls for that to be the format. If you don't want to be an articulate speaker, just do these 37 things. But if you do want to be an articulate speaker, here's a video where I show exactly the techniques that you can follow to become an articulate speaker in record time.